Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. Today, we're going to be talking all about the basics and how to be brilliant at them and why that's important when we start to look at leveraging emerging technologies. But before I dive into all the questions that I've got, can you give everybody a real quick introduction?
Absolutely. Thanks, Emma, for having me. I'm Saira Taneja, Chief Experience Officer with CoverWell. As far as my background goes, I have experience in sales, marketing, product, strategy, CX, largely within the insurance space. I've been in it for a decade and a half, largely in health insurance. I moved over to the exciting world of commercial auto 2 years ago, where now I'm in charge of all things experience, overseeing the customer success organization, marketing, as well as billing, interestingly enough. So happy to talk about all of that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. And as I teased in that little introduction there, we're going to be talking about the brilliance of basics, especially when we're looking at emerging technologies. So can you get us started by maybe sharing, because that is your phrase, being brilliant at the basics is your phrase. So can you share a little bit about what that means and why it's so important when we start to look at things like AI and other emerging technologies?
Absolutely. So I like to think about it as don't worry about the cherry on your sundae. If your ice cream sucks, you really have to think about the core of what it is that your organization is doing, the basics of the service or the product that you're offering, before you get to sort of all the extra things that are fun and interesting, but may not actually move the needle on experience of what your customers are experiencing. So that's really where the phrase is stemming from. As far as how we're applying it in CoverWell, it's in myriad ways. Before even we made such a significant push on AI for the service organization as we did last year, and I'm happy to talk about all of that. But it starts with just having. If I look at the customer success organization, Emma, it starts with having the right answers to the questions that your customers are calling about, to have those answers in an organized way. What we did was we created call scripts a couple of years ago for everybody in the customer success organization to be able to address the various inquiries that were coming in, so that they had sort of one song sheet that everybody was answering from, a knowledge base for our customers to go on to be able to look for their inquiry, an internal knowledge base for all of us to share information internally, because especially at CoverWell and the world of startups, things change very quickly. So we have to keep all of us up to date. So even before you think of AI and applying AI for customer service, you have to think about all of the data that you need to leverage that AI with.
So I would imagine too, being remote and trying to share that information as a startup is a pretty big piece of that as well. And I love that you one, if your ice cream is bad, don't care about the cherry. It's a perfect way of phrasing it. But I think so often people think of AI as this silver bullet, that they forget that knowledge base or the data that's feeding the solution has to be there and in place and clean and ready to go before you can ever bring it in. Just the same way that you can't just set a new employee loose with no training, you have to do the same thing with AI. So I love this idea of being brilliant with the basics. And you also just brought up maybe some of the use cases that you guys have been experimenting with and using AI for. So can you share a little bit with me about how you guys are using AI across the business?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're leveraging it in a number of different ways. In my world, especially for downstream parts of the experience. So when it comes to customer service, last year we deployed and employed, we like to say, Bob. He's our bundle of bots, an in-house built AI tool that is responding to the market when it comes to email inquiries that we're receiving. And it's fascinating just developing Bob into what he is today. But what I alluded to before were really foundational elements to feed the model for Bob, right? Our knowledge base, our call scripts, sort of all the real-time data that we're getting from calls that our people are having on the phone every day. That's all feeding the model to be able to make him smarter and smarter. Having said that, what's been fascinating learning with this is it takes a lot to stand up AI, especially customer-facing AI, because inevitably you will have times when the answer isn't perfect or the answer isn't right. And the part that's been really interesting, Emma, is having those conversations with our agent partners or our customers at Cover Whale to really understand sort of their thresholds and their interest and comfort with that AI. But that's sort of one of the most impactful use cases where we've leveraged AI. I'm happy to talk more about that. But just happy to have you lead sort of where you'd like me to go next.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I'd like to understand is you mentioned this idea of like downstream. And specifically, I would say within the insurance industry, when we looked at transformation, everybody focused on the front end because the customer experience and improving that customer experience is like the holy grail, so to speak. But
Yes.
why do those downstream use cases for AI or really technology in general matter so much when it comes to scaling a positive customer experience?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think downstream makes sense because a lot of the questions that you're going to receive as an organization are probably repeat questions, right? They may not be super unique in nature, whereas upstream, a lot of what we're doing in terms of continually developing our platform, in terms of the significant engineering and technology resources it's requiring to kind of get to the next level of where our company is going, that's not as repeatable, right? That requires a lot of critical thinking. So downstream makes sense for applying AI because I can tell you that, X percentage of our questions that come in from our customers have to do with requesting loss runs. So we've trained Bob to be able to actually pull them for them and give it to them. And so when you think about downstream use cases, it's those repeatable tasks that you want to apply technology because technology is helps your organization get to scale when it can be applied for repeatable, sort of continuous, predictive questions that are coming in. And so then what we're doing also is you start cross-training your people to do even more value add activities. And that's really what we're starting to realize as a business.
I could keep talking to you about this forever, especially the portion where we think about how we're able to use technology to offset manual tasks and focus our people. But at the same time, I usually have a limit of 3 questions to keep myself in check. But before we part, can you tell everybody a little bit about the session that you have coming up at SIR and what you're going to be speaking on?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. So I'm going to be speaking on April 29th at the Society of Insurance Research in Boston, my hometown. So it's not too much travel for me this time. I'm going to be doing a session on scaling positive experiences in AI. At the end of the day, the keynote after 5 p.m., I believe. So come check it out.
Thank you so much for joining me for the conversation. And certainly, anybody watching, thank you for joining us. And reach out to either one of us if you have any questions. But thank you again and have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.